So welcome to Planning for Your Spring online course. We are really glad to have everybody here with us today. Some people might be kind of filtering in slowly, so hopefully we'll get them caught up to speed. But we're here today to tell you some of the best practices for how to plan and make decisions about conducting your spring courses online. So a couple of introductions. I am Sherry Beck. I'm with the Office of Distance Education and E-Learning, and I'm joined today by Sarah Holt and Queenie Chow. So Sarah and Queenie, if you want to introduce yourselves really quickly.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Holt. I'm also an instructional designer at Odie.
Hi, I'm Queenie Chow, also from Odie, a project analyst and consultant.
And Queenie is going to be staffing our chat today where you can pose questions throughout the workshop. So Queenie, I don't know if you want to talk just really briefly about how that's going to work.
Sure. I just pasted some links in there for people. You don't have to feel like you need to check the chat at all the session if that's too much to manage, but feel free to check in there. I will be posting some links throughout the session as certain tools are mentioned. Sometimes I'll go grab a link for documentation for folks if they want to read more into that after the session. If you don't already see the chat, there should be a button at the bottom, kind of middle of your screen that looks like a speech bubble. You can click on that. If you're on mobile, you might have to tap on your screen to get that to show up toward the bottom, and then you can bring the chat up. And I will be posting those slides a few more times throughout the session because people who join a little bit later don't always see that chat history. So if you see me repeat myself a little bit in there, just kind of ignore it. We will not send these links afterwards, but you can download a copy of the chat by clicking on the three dots button on kind of the bottom right of your screen. If you're not able to do that and you need links after, feel free to email us and we're happy to send that to you after if you need that.
Okay, thank you, Queenie. So what are you here for today? These are some of the outcomes that we're going to be focusing on in the workshop. So the first one is a review of the university's expectations for spring 2021. If you've taught this semester, those expectations are very similar, but we're going to go through some dates and some other things that are important to keep in mind. Then the bulk of the workshop is going to be focused on the instructional design decisions you'll be making when it comes to putting your course online and navigating that course delivery. So those latter three bullet points, which I'll get into a little bit more on the next slide, Sarah, if you want to go ahead and advance. So again, we're going to start with those expectations. And then when we move into making those instructional design decisions, we're going to focus on 5 best practices. So there's connecting with your students and how to do that in the online space, sharing your materials in the learning management system, then providing opportunities for practice and application for your students throughout the semester. We'll talk about offering students opportunities for reflection and ways you can help them engage with the materials and the learning that you're presenting. And then really making your presence felt throughout the semester and everything that you're doing online. So as Queenie mentioned, throughout, you'll have opportunities to pose questions in the Zoom chat. Queenie does an excellent job fielding a lot of those. If there is something that we think it might benefit to talk about a little bit more in detail and for everybody to hear, Queenie will kind of pause and let myself or let Sarah know to address those. We'll also be stopping at certain points to allow you to reflect on some of the information that we're giving you. And we do have a worksheet that you can open up and take notes on, or if you have a pen and paper handy, you can take notes on that as well. At the end, we'll offer you further resources so you can find out where you can go from here. We're really giving you the basics, and then where can you go from here to get more assistance or to find out more information. So we do have a poll that we can go ahead and launch for you. That is just a little question to help us know who is here and what your experiences are with teaching online. So if you can go ahead and just answer that poll really quickly.
Okay, we're at about 65%, so keep clicking. looks like pretty much everybody has voted. We're at about 90%. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Perfect.
Yeah, it looks like a couple of you have taught the course face-to-face and then a few fully online. So for those fully on people who have taught it before fully online, this is an opportunity to think about how you've engaged already with some of the best practices that we're presenting and thinking about how you might kind of strengthen those for the spring semester. If you've only taught it face-to-face, you can really think about the method of adaptation and how can you take some of the things that you've done in person and translate those to the online space, or what are some things that you might need to tweak or replace or change? And it looks like a couple of you are teaching the courses hybrid or in person. And so we should say that some of the things we're talking about, these best practices, apply in person as well. So this material, if you are teaching in person, should still be relevant and useful for you. And it looks like we do have some people who are supporting other instructors. So you can pass this information along to them, or we are recording this so you can send them the recorded version of it so that they can watch on their own. So our next question, if you want to put this in the chat, we just want to get a sense of how you're feeling today. And that might be life in general. That might be about teaching this semester or teaching in the spring. So if you want to just put a one or couple word response in the chat to let us know how you're feeling. Sunshine, yes, I am loving that as well. This is awesome, guys. Everybody's happy and feeling good. Okay, we have an okay. That's okay. There are definitely still some stressors going on. There's some anxiety going on. And what we really hope is to alleviate a little bit of that anxiety, at least as it concerns teaching in the spring. But we have some excited and determined, and we're really glad to hear that. Feeling, so this is great. Oh, I'm very glad to hear that. Overwhelmed thinking about teaching in the spring because this is a new online platform. So yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are in that boat. So it's good to know that you're not alone. And we have this, and then we have other opportunities for you to familiarize yourself with teaching online. So at the end, if you're pretty new to all of this, you might take a look at some of those further resources. Okay, so there are some considerations to keep in mind as you go about planning and conducting your course in the spring. The first is that we are still in a global health crisis. It's not showing very many signs of abating, at least not right now. Who knows what it will look like in the spring? So that is something to keep in mind. There are also technological realities with students not being potentially where they thought they were going to be. They might not have access to the same technology. They might not have access to high-speed internet. So we want to really focus on those realities and on keeping it simple, kind of using Carmen as your primary method of delivery, which is something we'll talk about, and using it for those course materials, assignments, your mode of communication. We'll talk about intentional community and how do you build an intentional community online. We also want to think about planning with a lens of wellness. So part of that has to do with the pandemic and considerations of what do you do if you get sick and you need to step back from conducting the course for a moment, for a period of time. What are your expectations if a student gets sick? What do you want them to communicate to you, and how do you plan to work with them? There's also what we know about things like Zoom fatigue and just the fatigue of doing all of these things online. So planning for that, planning for some time to step away, and really just thinking about taking a break, and for your students, posting resources that are going to help them. And then you will also be thinking about those strategic decisions about content and activities that you'll be making when it comes to either planning the course in full online or adapting an in-person course into the online format. So we have a reflection question, the first one that we want you to start thinking about. So the first question here, what potential struggles will my students have when it comes to learning online? And then the second question, what potential struggles will I have? So if you want to take a moment, just really quickly to write that down. Okay. And then one of the things that you can do is kind of return to these questions, because these questions are kind of going to prime you for some of the strategies that we're discussing. You might think about how the strategies might mitigate or directly address those struggles, but you can also think about how those struggles might influence the way you approach the strategies that we're discussing today. So I will let Sarah take over the next couple of slides, and she is going to talk to you about some of those expectations for the spring semester.
Yeah, so most of you are probably familiar with how to access the Ohio State academic calendar, but because those calendars are often published several years in advance, and then we've obviously had to make a lot of adjustments semester to semester over the past few months, there are some versions of outdated calendars out there floating around. So we just wanted to start everybody on the same page and make sure you have the most up-to-date dates. Spring term for 2021 will begin on January 11th and end on April 21st. So sort of the flip version of what we're doing for fall, the first week of classes for spring will be fully online. And that, I think, is to mitigate the spread of COVID as students return to Columbus, return to campus for some of them, so that they can have a kind of an isolation period if they were home for the holidays in other locations, right? So you will have classes starting, but everyone will be planning some kind of online instruction for that first week. Another major change is that there will be no spring break in the way that we're familiar with it. There is no full week off mid-semester. Instead, we will have 2 smaller instructional breaks, and those are on February 9th and Wednesday, March 31st. So for some of you, that's going to require a rethink of how you've organized some of your projects, how you've organized some of your readings, even if you're not going online full-time for this semester. The university is sticking with in-person finals as far as we know right now. Again, you're going to want to keep a close eye on those updates as we go. Hopefully spring will see things getting better, and by the time we're heading into finals, we'll be in a good shape to continue to be in-person instruction. But for right now, for everyone, the plan is if you're teaching a face-to-face or hybrid class, that you would be able to have in-person finals. That's a little different from fall. So if you're teaching both or helping others plan their teaching, that's something to keep in mind with what we know for right now. The university is sticking with a required subset of key best practices for online courses. So if you know you're teaching online or supporting others who are planning to teach online, there are some university requirements. So we want to make sure everyone is aware of those. For all courses, the expectation is that there are regular and substantive academic interactions with the instructor. That students should have a required participation activity at least once per week. Both of these have to do with our state licensures. These are not correspondence courses. Students have eligibility for financial aid, other kinds of athletics, or other kinds of things that they're involved with that require them to attend classes. And so these are some of the ways we think about that in online spaces. Online courses should ensure that instruction time is equivalent to in-person, and you're going to need to include the expectations about the format and the modality in your syllabus ahead of time. So right now, this is not unique, but the scale at which it is happening is kind of unique. All of our students are taking some interesting mixes of fully in-person on campus, hybrid courses where they're only on campus for a few days or a few lessons per semester, plus online courses where they have a synchronous time to meet in Zoom, plus online courses that happen fully asynchronously. And you can imagine what kind of a puzzle that is for our advisors and our students to try to put together something that's not overlapping in time and space. So when you make those choices about what kind of course you're going to have, or if you have decisions to make that are not given to you, make sure that you're putting those really clearly. If you're planning to have a Zoom lesson online, that is in your syllabus and is out to the advisors, to your department as early as possible, so students can make those scheduling decisions. We also want to make sure that everybody teaching online has online specific policies about academic integrity. I know that cheating was a big conversation that came up so much in spring when we went to emergency remote, and it was a concern for folks. And so we just want to let you know that there is a workshop coming up, if that is a specific concern of yours, all about academic integrity in online spaces. And we do have a lot of online specific policies. We're not going over a lot of those today, but if that's of interest, that's another whole workshop coming up next week, I believe. The university is also continuing to ask everyone to use the Carmen Key 4 practices. If you need to learn more about that, you can find information on keepteaching.osu.edu for the consistent student experience. Essentially, it's please use Carmen, please use your gradebook, please communicate through announcements in Carmen, and make sure that you have your courses published and your syllabus available. So pretty basic stuff. I think most people are on board with that, but that will continue to be an expectation for all courses moving forward. And then as we think specifically about online courses and maybe how they might be different from something you've taught face-to-face in the past, you want to think about adapting those materials and activities for online learning. We're trying really hard not to just do exactly the same thing, pull all your PowerPoints over and talk at them in the same way, because it is a different modality and it does require us to think about an adaptation of some of those pedagogies you may have learned in the past. We also want to make sure that our assignments and assessments are appropriate for online spaces and are practicable in online spaces. And this is, I think, what probably many of you are here to learn more about today. So we'll spend some time showing you some things that are possible and ways to make some of those tricky things you're used to doing in person possible in online spaces.
Okay, your next reflection question, and I'll try to give you a full minute or two. I think I kind of only gave you a couple seconds last time, so sorry about that. But this reflection question, we want you to think about the 3 most important things you want students to gain from the course. So what do you want them to really walk away with? It might be course goals and objectives, or it might be certain experiences. So you can take some time to write that down or type that up. Okay, with that reflection question, I want you to keep those answers in mind when you're thinking about selecting your course materials, the ways you're having students engage with those materials, or the assessments that you're planning, and the ways you're having students connect with each other, and kind of use those 3 most important things or any others that you come up with alongside those to really drive those decisions that you're making. So we will go ahead and launch into some of those best practices for teaching online. Again, these best practices that we're talking about today are connecting with your students, sharing your materials, giving students opportunities for practice and application, allowing students to engage with the material and with each other, and providing them spaces to reflect, and then your own presence in the course and how your presence is really driving these other things as well. So the first, connecting with students. In a survey done in the spring that Ohio State did, we found that students were feeling very disconnected from each other and from their instructor. And online teaching was new to a lot of people. It was new to students as well. But a question often is, how do you form those connections online? The good news is that it can be done. It can be done really well, and it can be a really gratifying experience, but it does need to be done intentionally. And one of the things we know about those connections is that feeling connected to an instructor or to fellow classmates reduces stress, and it allows students to be more successful. Integrating resources, support resources, which is one way that you can help foster those connections. Those resources can support students by helping them build key skills for wellness and for overall success. So Sarah is going to walk us through some ideas and strategies for doing these things.
So the first thing that you want to think about, and this is a really good time to start thinking about this now as you're planning for spring because you have a little bit of time, is how you're going to welcome students to a course. There's a lot of small things you can add to an online space in Carmen into one of your welcome modules or to the homepage, or that you can include in a welcome announcement for a course that helps students see you as a human being in the course who will be the instructor, and helps them feel like they're not just paying for some kind of a computer AI module that's prefabbed and just sent out to everybody. So the one that we think is probably the best bang for your buck when we look at how students talk about this in their evaluations of instruction and the way that they view materials in Carmen is some kind of a welcome message. So you think about when you teach a face-to-face course, and on that first day, you don't just walk in and go to the board and start teaching algebra, right? You always start with like, hi, my name is Sarah. I've been a Buckeye for 15 years. I came to this profession because I love this. My research is about that. I'm very excited. Here's what the course is going to be. And we need to intentionally make space to welcome students into our online courses in the same way. So this is a good place to add an introduction to yourself. This can be a very simple video. You can use the webcam in your camera or in your phone. You can use it on your laptop if you have an iPad. These don't need to be fancy, high quality production value videos. They can just be short 2 or 3 minute self-made DIY videos where you let them see you as a human being and talk to them directly. If you don't have that technology available, this can still be a photo of yourself, preferably a recent one, even though we may not all be sporting our best COVID haircuts right now. Students really don't care what you look like. They just appreciate seeing you and getting to have a face that goes with the comments or the lectures. And so you can also just have a text introduction if that works better for you. Clear instructions for how you would like them to connect with you. This is always important, but possibly even more important now that we don't have office hours in person on campus available for drop-in. Not all of us have university phones access. I know Sherry and I and Queenie, we're all working from home right now. We don't have our university phones available to us. So email is really the best way to get a hold of me right now. That's a little different for me from other semesters if I'm trying to have students chat with me, right? Another thing that's really cool in Carmen that you can get to know yourself now and prep for, and then ask students to use in those first few days of class is Name Coach. And this is a really neat feature in Carmen. If you open up your course section, you'll see it in the left-hand nav bar. And this allows students to record their spoken name and include their pronouns as well. And so if you have a small course or you're going to be doing Zoom sessions, this is a great way to hear their names and be able to practice them so that as you're engaging with them live, you can pronounce their names correctly. But even if you have a really large course and you don't anticipate, or asynchronous course, and you don't anticipate needing to say your names often, this is really nice to communicate that you care how to say their name. And then if they come to an office hour, or if you choose to leave an audio feedback on some of their work, you can just check it quickly and make sure that you're saying their name properly. At a place as large as Ohio State, we hear from students all the time that teachers who take the time to know their name and say them correctly is a huge way for them to feel seen and valued as humans, right? They don't like just being a student number. And even in online spaces, that goes so far to making that connection between an instructor and their students. We can also welcome students by getting to know a little bit about them with an icebreaker activity. Discussion boards in Carmen are a great place for this. You might ask them to make a video of themselves answering a fun question or about their goals for the semester or why they're taking your course. And either in an icebreaker discussion or in an ungraded survey in Carmen, it's a really great idea to ask, what what they need you to know about them. This is a really nice open-ended question that will allow you to find out things like, I'm having problems with my Wi-Fi, or I don't have access to Zoom from 3 to 5 because I'm home with my younger siblings and they have to Zoom with their classes. Or I'm getting a lot of glitches watching your lectures because I have low speed internet in my dorm room right now. It may be that you may find out that they're struggling with other things like food insecurity or stress and anxiety. Or you may just find out that they love your course and that they're really, really looking forward to learning everything about it. So this is a really great way to start the course that will get you a wealth of information and allow students to choose what to share. That's before the course starts or in those first days, but we also would encourage you to connect with your students throughout the semester. So you can have regular check-ins where you might post fun questions or see how they're doing, some kind of a discussion board where you ask people to let you know what they're reading or watching, how they're feeling, how much sleep are you getting. And you can offer some of those work-life balance tips that you're finding as well, even if it's just acknowledging, hey, I'm not sleeping great this week, but I've started taking a walk after dinner. What are you guys doing to stay healthy and grounded during midterms? Students really tell us a lot that they appreciate those kinds of human moments where instructors offer them study skills or tell them how to approach a text, or if it's in a major course, how this kind of work might be connecting with future research opportunities. Anything that you can do to show that kind of professionalization and offer some of your expertise, whether it's about your regular life or your research life, really helps them connect with you throughout the semester. If there's those success strategies, you might write those directly into Carmen or share them in a video. And it's really nice if you can have a few optional student forums in Carmen. That might be for social chat, for them to answer each other's questions about the assignments, or to ask these kinds of fun check-in questions as you go. Particularly important for spring, we'll continue to be offering directions for what to do in a crisis. And there is university suggested starter language, but you'll need to think about your own policies. What is your plan if you get sick, as Sherry mentioned, and you need to step away from the course for a while? Who will be stepping in? Our students really want to know that they'll have continuity of instruction, that there is a plan. Hopefully you'll never need to use it. And then also let them know, what should they do if they're sick? What should they do if they have to quarantine or self-isolate in a place that interrupts their ability to join Zoom lessons or complete work on time, for example? Having some kind of a policy really helps them feel like everything is going to be okay and they know what to do if they need it. And then throughout the class, just as we hope you do in your face-to-face classes, ask for feedback. Do a mid-semester feedback survey, an anonymous poll in Carmen can get you that information, or check in after a major assignment, ask them how they thought they did. Was there anything that they would have done differently to prepare differently, so that you can tweak as you go along. This is some of that university prepared language that I mentioned. Ideally, you would share university resources in all semesters, but there are a few here that are specifically geared towards helping students in the current pandemic. So the Wellness Center, the Wellness app is a great resource for students that is constantly updated and keeping them informed with ways to stay healthy and safe in this time, as well as resources for food security, counseling and consultation, and the Advocacy Center. Again, we don't ever expect you to be a counselor for your students, but being able to say, here are some resources if you need them, goes a long way to communicating care and helping them find those things when they do need them, so that you don't become the primary resource for all of these kinds of issues. Queenie has shared these slides several times in the chat. So if you want to copy these and put them directly in your course, that's the best way, is just to grab that PowerPoint and copy these directly out of the slide.
Okay, your next discussion question or reflection question. So thinking about some of the strategies that Sarah just mentioned, what can you incorporate into your course to help students feel supported and connected, both at the beginning of the semester and then throughout the term? So I'll give you a minute or two to answer that question. Okay, and you might keep this question in mind when we come back to instructor presence at the end of the workshop, because what Sarah just mentioned and instructor presence connect really, really nicely. And those are also really good ways to increase your presence in the course. So we'll take a moment to pause and to see if you have any questions about connecting with students. And I did see something came through in the chat. One of you mentioned that Name Coach wasn't working for you and you couldn't get it to work even with assistance from tech support. Hopefully tech support is now able to remedy that. However, if Name Coach still isn't working, you might consider, if you have an icebreaker discussion, having students audio or video record that, and in that introduce themselves by name. And that might kind of take the place of Name Coach if it isn't working for you. But if you have other questions right now, go ahead and put them in the chat, and Sarah or I will try to answer them. That's okay. I didn't know, Sarah. Oh, sorry, that was directly to me. Never mind. Okay, well, it doesn't seem like questions are coming through. However, if you think about something later on, we can always go back and answer it. And we do have opportunities at the end of the workshop also to open it up to questions. Oh, here we go. How can you ensure engagement with multiple students? So I'm not sure. Oh, here we go. Times only that consistently participate. Yeah, and that can be hard to know why some students are participating and why some aren't. It could have to do with technological difficulties. It could have to do with students' comfort level. So some students, for example, may not feel comfortable participating in a synchronous session, but might feel more comfortable participating in an asynchronous discussion board. So something you can think about, especially when we start talking about opportunities for practice and application, is maybe incorporating different ways for students to engage and reflect. So you might get some more of that participation from students that you don't ordinarily hear from. And how to facilitate discussion. So that's a very good question, but one that might require a little bit more time. Sarah, is there a workshop on that in particular? We do have good articles on the Teaching and Learning Center, which we'll share a link to at the end of the workshop.
There's a really good recording about a month ago. Some other facilitators from ODEE put on a different workshop that's specifically about engaging students in active learning. And that went into a lot of online discussions, but also other kinds of participation activities that you might use when you were saying maybe discussions aren't the best fit. And then also the Drake Institute, and we'll share some of their links to their materials and their workshops at the end as well. But they can, the consultants at the Drake Institute can also really help you think about really digging into your discussions and what might be happening there that you could adjust. So maybe asking different questions, thinking about scaffolding them into the readings differently. So there certainly are lots of resources available to help you dig into that. I am going to show you a few things here in a minute that are related, but not specifically about discussions, but that help students feel ready to participate when it's time. So maybe that'll help too.
I think that I was going to say, I think that should get at some of the other questions that were just posed in the chat as well.
If we don't get to all of those, feel free to remind us a little bit later if we don't cover the specific things you're thinking about right now.
Okay, so we will move on to sharing materials with students, specifically in Carmen. And one of the things that Sarah mentioned in a previous slide that I think is important to hit on is consistency in the student experience. And she talked a little bit about how students are having different classes in a lot of different formats. Students are experiencing that as well in the way instructors are using Carmen. There are about 1 billion different ways to use Carmen, and students are experiencing all billion of those ways from different instructors. So it's really important to provide structure and direction in the way that students are navigating the course material and the way that they can access those materials or find out due dates or find assignments. that really keeps the focus on the learning, because that's where you want students' attention to go. You don't want them to have to expend energy in trying to track down those assignments or track down those materials. Sarah is going to go a little bit into a specific template that Odie has created and that is on the Keep Teaching website. This template provides a navigational structure that you might use for your own course that helps students go step by step through the semester and week by week through the semester. We also have a template for individual assignment pages and discussion board pages that offer ways you can lay out those instructions and some other need to know aspects for assignments. And you can kind of replace some placeholder language that we've put in there to adapt it and modify it to your own use. But I'll let Sarah take it away to talk about some examples.
Okay, so the bulk of the interactions a student is going to have in an online course, even if you have Zoom sessions, is going to be with those materials. So we want to make sure that when we're sharing them in helpful ways. So as Sherry was mentioning, organizing those materials and activities into modules is the best way to help them know what to do each week. So you may be very familiar with modules already, but maybe you've only heard that word and you're not really sure what that means or what it could mean for your class. I'm going to show you a bunch of examples from Carmen in a minute, but I just kind of want to prime you by explaining what we think of when we talk about modules. So essentially a module is a repeated structure that sets the expectations for how to learn in this space. We really encourage you to think about using weekly modules or some kind of a shorter, manageable set of activities and learning experiences that might follow a weekly kind of arc. And if you think back to the university's expectations, students should be engaging with the course at least once per week, and they should be having regular and substantive interactions with you about weekly. And so that module, if it takes about a week of your course, is a nice way to mesh and meet all of those expectations. We can use the headers and titles of a module to communicate our expectations and make it really clear what students are supposed to do with the things that we're sharing. And we can use those pages that Sherry mentioned to give context and guidance on the course materials. And in some ways, this is where it's different than just posting a reading, for example. You're able to give your expertise and your instructor lens to why have you chosen these readings? How do they fit together? And what should someone be looking for or thinking about as they engage with them? So again, here's that link. So if you're downloading these slides for use, you can follow that link and get all of the materials that I'm about to show you in that Carmen template. So this is an example you'll see there on the side of a weekly module if you use the Odie template. So you'll see that there's a module title and that is labeled by the week. And then it also has a title that includes the topic that the materials for the week are going to cover. So you want to use your titles in a repeated structure so that students can kind of settle in and remember this class works in this way. Just like you probably in your face-to-face classes have some kind of a routine. Monday is lecture on new material, and then we do our discussions. And then on Wednesdays, we do labs. And on Fridays, we have assignments due. Whatever your normal structure is for getting through a week, you can start to think about how that might work online. We want to make this as helpful for students as possible. These are the titles that that you would get when you download that template. So there's getting information and ideas, dialogue and reflection, and practice and application. These are based on general online learning best principles. If you have things that students are doing each week where they're getting new information, where they have a chance to have a conversation and connect with others and do some reflection, and then some practice and application, you're hitting those main learning experiences that will produce good outcomes. But you're welcome to tweak these and change them in a way that makes sense for you. Some of the things we would encourage you not to tweak are the due dates. So you'll notice that here where those big red arrows are, the due dates are visible within the module. You create these when you create those items. If you create a quiz or an assignment or a discussion, you can put a due date in at that screen where you create those items. Carmen is really clever in that it takes that due date that you create once and puts it in front of students in all kinds of places. And we've heard from them over and over and over, particularly since March, that this is one of the biggest things you can do to help them stay on track and stay engaged with your course on a regular basis. So this is one of the places where it shows up, which really helps them remember, okay, my discussion is due on Wednesday. My quiz is due on Friday. This is an example module that takes the basic OD template. You'll see it has that getting information and ideas, practice and application, and a weekly wrap up that is that quiz and some wind down materials, but it's tweaked. So in this case, it's got weekly wrap up, but it also has a recitation. So I know that some of you probably have situations with face-to-face courses that are maybe not immediately obvious how to adapt them for an online space. And I wanted to show you, this is just one creative way that one instructor is successfully doing that right now at Ohio State. So traditionally, they would have had a recitation section in a computer lab. And when we talked about, what was helpful for students about that, he mentioned being able to go to them and hear their individual questions and see their screen and see where they were struggling, see what was going wrong. So he created a discussion board that's open from Monday through Wednesday evening for students to start their homework and find those places where they get stuck and share their screenshots and ask their questions in that discussion board. Then on Thursday, he does an optional Zoom session where some students are able to join him live. And you'll notice that happens at 6:30 in the evening. It's optional, but that was a time that some of his students who work full time or take courses on campus during the day could join in the evening. But then he was able to also answer those discussion board questions, even for the students who couldn't join live. He records the whole Zoom session so that all students have access to it after the fact, and then posts that on Friday morning. So then students still have all day Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to complete their homework, having access to all of those solutions in that kind of real-time question and answering session. So this is just a creative way to get around adapting that experience for an online setting. Here's another module that's been adapted for a synchronous session. So if you're planning to teach an online class that will meet in Zoom on a regular day and time, we would encourage you to add a header in every week. It's a great idea to have that information in the syllabus to meet your university expectations. But if you think about how students actually engage week to week, by the time you get to week 7, 8, 12, 14, they're probably not going back to the syllabus to find your Zoom link. And so you can have it at the top of the modules, but it's really nice to have that in here right in the module so that they know what time to log in. They're not spending 5 minutes searching around in Carmen when it's time for class to start. They just log in, go to the week that it is, and click on the link, and they're in class, ready to learn, right? We also would encourage you to post videos of these. If you have students that are quarantining, self-isolating, are maybe sick and need to miss a synchronous session, or having connection troubles where maybe the Zoom speed at their home Wi-Fi is not able to keep up with video and audio at the same time. This isn't an issue for everyone. We were originally saying that everybody should post every video, and you may not need to post them all the time. This is one of those great reasons to ask students, what do they need to know and what can they expect from you? You would probably want to record them, and then it's up to you. If you know that you have students who need this, you can post it. And if you only have a small number of students and you know everybody's able to connect, you don't have to do this, but it's a great idea to get in the habit of recording them every week in case you need to post it or share it with a smaller subset of students. We know that not every week has to be exactly the same. So while a module should be a repeated structure that gives students an expectation of what is going to happen every week, sometimes we don't have everything every week. Sometimes there's not a discussion. Sometimes you may have a larger assignment due and you want them to take a couple of weeks to work on it. When things like that happen, you can just use the headers to bring attention to what is going to be different. That's going to save you a ton of emails with students saying, I can't find the homework this week. Well, that's good. There is no homework this week, right? So we can use those headers to draw their attention to what's different. You might say, no assignment due this week, work on your first draft. No synchronous session this week, use that time to review your lectures for the midterm. Just give them a little hint about what is happening and what should they be doing with that time instead. Finally, you can make these as complicated as you need to for something that makes sense for your course. While we have showed you several examples of our suggested language that comes with the OD template, this is all customizable. So here's a much more complicated module structure that worked really well for a different kind of course. In this course, they started with an overview page, which was pretty standard. That lets students know what's coming up across the week, what should they expect. But then she wanted to have a current events discussion. So starting on the first day of the module, they're ready to talk about something, and they don't have to have watched the lecture or done any of the readings for that week to get started with that discussion. Then she had a theoretical set of readings, and in this case, it was systems theory. So there was a subset of readings about that topic with a reading quiz, and then a whole other set of material about a different topic every week, organized by case study. So for this teacher, having all of the readings in one place and all of the lectures in one place didn't make sense. And instead, she split them out by topic. And that's perfectly fine. What you need to think about for your own module structure is what makes sense. How would you like students to engage with this throughout the week? Finally, Sherry mentioned pages. So a lot of the things I've been showing right now are the module overviews, but when you click down into each of those items, we also encourage you to use a template for the specific materials that you're sharing. So this is an example of a lecture page and a readings page. And you can see that there's some suggestions here that nudge you to give your students a little context about what are they about to watch or what are they about to read. Why have you chosen these readings? How do they connect with the things you were doing last week? What should they be thinking about, or what questions should they be asking as they watch or read these materials? And here's a great place to link directly to PDFs for taking notes, to if you're linking to TED Talks or things on YouTube, you can put those direct links there. And that way students have everything they need to succeed as they engage with your materials.
Okay, so for this reflection question, if you've taught the course before and you already have a Carmen shell that you've been using, you can think about what you might need to adjust to help students better navigate the course. If you don't have a Carmen shell, if this is the first time you've ever taught the course or the first time you've used Carmen in teaching the course, maybe think about something that really stuck out to you and what Sarah just mentioned as something you would really like to try and make use of. And I'll give you a minute or two to do that. Okay, so for the sake of time, we had a built-in time to ask a question or to have you pose questions at this time. But for the sake of time, I'm going to bracket this and we'll come back to it with our next opportunity to ask questions. And hopefully we can just make up a little bit of the time because we want to make sure that we get you out of here when we promised to. So the next section is practice and application and providing students with those opportunities. So for this semester from students, we're hearing two struggles from them of things that they're encountering, and they're a little bit different but connected. And the first involve courses that really revolve around just a couple of very high stakes assignments. And students aren't given a lot of opportunity between those assignments to practice and apply their learning. And so they're feeling a little bit adrift and they're feeling really, really stressed. And in addition to that, students are also experiencing in other classes a lot of practice and application, but they're not receiving feedback from their instructors, or the instructors aren't updating the grade book. And so it's kind of a similar thing where even if you have that practice and application, if you're not getting feedback on it, you're still going to feel adrift and disconnected. And that stress can often lead to academic dishonesty when students feel like they don't have what they need to do well in the course. So what we want to think about in this section are the ways that you can apply or give students the opportunity to apply their learning. And we want to think about multiple formats in which you can do that. So the person who asked in the chat about ways to engage varying students, this is one way that you can think about that, because things like short responses or quizzes are great, but Carmen allows for a lot more than that. So what are some of the various ways you can give students to practice and apply their learning? And then we also know that students need guidance and need feedback throughout the process. You can kind of step in if a student is off track and get them back on track, or you can keep them engaged and motivated through your feedback. So Sarah will touch on a couple of ways that you can do both of those things.
Yeah. So the first thing in this planning stage that you're in right now, as you think about opportunities for practice and application, is to identify a few core activities. Not every online class needs to have every single learning experience. We don't do that in our in-person classes, and we're not asking you to do that online. So think about what's really core in your discipline, in your course, for students to be able to practice with the content you need them to know. So that might mean they need to have practice quizzes or a self-check opportunity. Maybe group work is really important to you, or having homework or time to do personal reflection and connection between their lives and the material you're discussing. Maybe Zoom with a live participation element is important to you. And then when you've identified a small subset of core activities you really need students to do, then you can look at what tool will let you do that best. So we want you to start with the OSU supported tools, preferably the things that are integrated to Carmen, like the discussions, the quiz tool, the assignments tool, and Zoom. And honestly, this will cover almost all of the creative ways that we can have students practice. I'll show you a couple in a few minutes. The reasons why we would ask you to start and do your best to see what you can do with Ohio State supported tools is that I don't want any of you to have to become IT support specialists. So there are lots of amazing apps and tools out there, but if we start with those and something goes wrong, and Ohio State doesn't have support for it, then students have to come to you to troubleshoot, and they have to come to you to say, I didn't get it done because this didn't work. And then you have to figure out how to make it work. If you use these Ohio State supported tools first, then when something goes wrong, you can point them to the service desk and they can get help from our professionals with a 24-hour line. They can get emails back, they can do live chat or phone calls, and it takes that burden off of you so that you can use your time in a more focused way. This kind of practice and application that we're talking about can be ungraded, or it can be low stakes points. And this is one way that we would encourage you to think about that participation requirement. So just like you would probably expect your students to show up to a classroom if you were teaching a face-to-face course, we expect them to show up in Carmen and do something every week more than just open the PDF of our readings, right? So this is a great way to see who's engaging, who's participating. And for those of you who are having those challenges of some students participating more than others, this might be a great place to kind of challenge yourself to add something on a weekly basis. That said, as we're making planning choices, we do want to keep those barriers to participation in mind and have a plan B. So if you're requiring something in Zoom or where groups have to meet together in a synchronous time, have some kind of a plan B in mind for how a student could get their participation points or get that learning accomplished if they can't log in at that particular time or if they are having high-speed internet struggles. So pre-recorded downloadable materials is a great way around that, or allowing students to work at their own pace within each week is a great way. If you have an asynchronous course, or if most of your materials can be worked on at their own pace, so that you have a sort of a final end of the week deadline, either Friday afternoon or sometime on Sunday, but that within the week they can work around their work schedules, their other courses, other things that are happening in their life that may prevent them from logging in at a certain time. Here's an example of a practice opportunity that's a little bit outside of the box. And we get a lot of questions from folks who have labs or recitations or practica or do a lot of active learning hands-on activities in their face-to-face courses. So there's a lot of confusion about the quiz tool. It is called Quizzes, but you can use it for a lot of other things that are not actually traditional quizzes. So this is an example of a lab activity in an anthropology course that is built using the quiz tool. tool. So anytime you have an activity where a student individually will engage with material and answer some questions, the quiz tool is a great way to do that, even if it's not a quiz. So in this lab, you can see they're organized by stations. Then they have high quality photographs of the artifacts that students need to engage and identify. And then they can answer some questions about that, just as they might if they were able to pick up these lithic stone tools and move them around in person. So again, they engage with some materials. That could be a reading. It might be other websites, a video that you create or that someone else has created for you, high quality photos, any kind of information that will be static and shareable. And then they answer questions on their own. Here's another example of using the quiz tool as an activity. So this is a sort of a scavenger hunt activity that an instructor put together to help students prepare to do their own resource. So this scavenger hunt, instead of giving them comprehension quizzes on reading about the countries they were studying, she asked them to follow the instructions and use this website. So you can see that it takes them to the CIA fact book. And that's a resource that she wanted them to get really familiar with using so that when they came to the part of the course where they were doing their own research, they would be really ready to go right back to that source and use it effectively to find out the answers to their own questions. So she had them practice that weekly with these scavenger hunts about the countries. Instead of just watching a lecture about the country or doing a reading, they had to go find that information on their own. These do have correct answers as they go, so it was really easy for her to set up with some automatic feedback. As Sherry was saying, the quiz tool lets you, after students do the answer, give either general feedback about the question, no matter how you answered, or specific information if you got it right or if you got it incorrect. So being able to add all of that feedback beforehand is a lot of work for sure, but it allows students to have that instant feedback. As soon as they submitted this scavenger hunt activity, they got feedback on what they got wrong, how to make it better next time, or what they were doing well. That's one thing I really like about the quiz tool. Another way that you can have students submit work to you is an assignment using the assignments tool. And again, obviously, a lot of folks use these for big assignments like papers or larger writings or PowerPoint presentations and things like that. But you can also think of this as a practice opportunity. You can use this to have peer review writing between students or to submit first drafts or to write personal reflections. This is not only limited to something that is a large assignment. What you get with that OD template that we've mentioned are all of these headers and this formatting. And this is to draw your attention to the kind of information that we know from the research helps students succeed in online assignments. So when you use this template, it asks us to be really explicit about our expectations. What are the objectives? What's the point of this? What are the directions? And this is pretty literal, like what are you creating? A 2-page document, a 40-slide slide deck, a video, a text response, APA, MLA, those kinds of things can go here. And then what to include, what questions should they be answering? What should they engage with? How many resources or any resources, that kind of information. If there's anything they need to succeed, like logins for Microsoft 360, tutorials online, previous readings that they've done in earlier weeks, you might also list that in the resources. And then again, we have really clear online specific policies about what counts as academic integrity for you. Remember, as Sherry mentioned, they're in lots of different courses with all different kinds of expectations. And what counts as cheating in your class may be the required mode of communication in another class. And what is collaboration and help can look very different from discipline to discipline. So this is a great place to just make it really clear so they can meet those expectations. Also, again, please include those due dates in your assignments when you create them.
Okay, so for this reflection question, we'd like you to think about which activities or assessments that you're currently using might need significant adjustments, might with a few adjustments be easily adapted, what might need to be created, and what might need to be dropped. And if you've never taught the course that you're planning to teach before, maybe again, just focus on something that really stuck out to you that you might want to incorporate. I'll give you a minute or two to think about that. Okay, and we'll go ahead and take just a couple moments for any questions that you might have, either about practice and application or about connecting with students. So go ahead and post in the chat if you have any questions. Okay, well, we'll forge ahead for the sake of time, but if something occurs to you, please go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll try to return to it at the end of the presentation. So our next topic is engaging students in conversation and reflection. So we've already gotten a couple of questions about student connection and about discussion boards, and that's really great. Those are things that you definitely want to incorporate into your course. We know that students want to feel connected to each other now more than ever. We have a lot of freshmen who, even if they're on campus, maybe their situation is a little different from the typical situation for a freshman on campus. Maybe they don't have the same number of friends they ordinarily would, or don't have a roommate, or in some way just aren't having that typical freshman experience. The same thing for transfer students for the spring semester who might be coming in. We really want to make sure that they're feeling connected, and we want to talk about how you can do that online. At the same time, there's still a lot of social distancing going on, so students might be feeling a little bit disconnected in that capacity. And we do know from the research that peer-to-peer interactions can create community, they can foster motivation, and they can foster engagement with the course materials and with the assessments that you're planning. And building community online, because there's not that physical proximity, it does need to be done a little bit more intentionally, but there are, again, ways to do that. And Sarah is going to walk you through some of the ways that you can engage students in conversation and also give them spaces to reflect on their learning.
So one of the things I was thinking about, as you were mentioning in the chat, some of you who are struggling to get more of your students engaged, is that thing that Sherry was mentioning, that different students connect with different kinds of engagement, just like we have quiet students in any class that we would teach. So our goal is maybe not that every student engages verbally or vocally in every Zoom session, but thinking about some way to get them to engage with either you and or their peers at least once a week. So if you're thinking about, having different ways of engaging each week, hopefully every student is engaging with at least one of them once a week. A Carmen discussion is kind of the default for a lot of courses. This is probably the thing that you've heard about or used or seen most frequently. But as most of you are noting in the chat, this doesn't just go swimmingly on its own if you just say, discuss the readings, go. So some of our suggestions for when you're setting up your discussion boards are to post a prompt, let the students respond, but add some structure and criteria to help them know how to discuss and what that looks like and what you want them to do. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. If discussion boards aren't your thing, if they're not appropriate for your content, or they're not going well, or if you don't like them yourself, that's okay. You don't have to do them. You can do Zoom with participation in breakout rooms. That's an opportunity for students to work together, to talk together, and to connect. Or you might have an active learning activity like group work, where they talk to each other with a goal of creating something. You can also do reflections where they're connecting with you and sharing their real-time thinking about things in an ungraded survey that comes to you. I would hope that you would find at least a few ways for them to connect together, but not every single one of these engagement points has to be student to student. As long as there's some opportunities for student to student, that doesn't have to be every single week. One of the ways that we can really encourage folks to get in there and meet our expectations is to define what counts as participation for us, and to offer alternative ways that may happen asynchronously. So we'll look at a few opportunities for that in the next examples, but you might want to think about, can they be taking notes? If they're not comfortable talking, and share those notes with the class? Can they create a wrap-up summary of the main points that a verbal discussion in Zoom created and share that in a discussion board after the fact? If they're going to be working in a discussion board, can you have some kind of an artifact at the end of the conversation that someone can help edit or research and put together? That really helps students see different ways to participate if they're not big talkers. Here's an example of one of the OD templates that we use and what a discussion might look like. I know this is a lot of words. You don't need to look at these little tiny type and try to read all of this. What I want to draw your attention to is that in an online discussion, you may need to have way more directions than you're typically comfortable with giving them in a face-to-face class. So what we would encourage you to do, and if you get an OD template, the headers that you will start with are to give them some context. Why are you having this discussion? What is the topic you're engaging with? And what is that conflict or tension or puzzle or problem or curiosity point that allows multiple perspectives and makes this a good fit for a discussion? You want to tell them what to do ahead of time. Discussions go so much better if students start with some kind of information. That might be their lived experiences that they want to think about for a little while and decide how much or what to share. Or it may be something from your readings that you want to make sure, hey, everybody read Smith 2012 before you do this discussion, because I need you to cite it or talk about it or engage with it. It may be a video you want them to watch. Whatever the preparation is, here's some examples of like questions you might want them to consider. And then the instructions. What does a good discussion post look like for you? There's lots of sample language in the OD Resource Center, the Teaching and Learning Resource Center, to get you started if you've never seen examples of online discussion expectations. But asking them to, move the conversation forward and not just regurgitate what's already been said. And then what counts as a good response. You may also want to take some time and space to explain what counts as a responsible or respectful or civil engagement, so that you're not going on one end of the spectrum where they just say, going off of what Sherry said, Sherry did a great job, good job, Sherry, the end. And then the other end where maybe they're shredding each other's arguments to pieces and being really aggressive in a non-productive way. So you can give them some guidelines about how to engage in that space. If you're going to ask for reflection and some opportunities for students to reflect and share with you how they're learning about their own learning or how things are going for them, this is an example of how one of the ways you might ask that. This is a short ungraded survey in Carmen. You can change this to be anonymous or not, depending on what questions you're asking. In this case, this was a sort of feedback about the course opportunity. So they did set it to anonymous, but it would show that a student had completed it or not completed it. And they were able to get just, a few points for completing it, no matter what they wrote in there. And that let the instructors kind of course correct and hear the lectures are too long, I need them in shorter, or I'm having trouble connecting to this resource, that kind of thing that really helped them adjust as they went.
Okay, so for this reflection question, we want you to think about week 1 of your course and what sort of student-to-student interaction makes sense to include at the outset, so you can start that student-peer interaction off from the get-go. So I'll give you a minute or two to think about that one.
One thing I forgot to mention earlier is what Sherry just sort of alluded to. One of the biggest predictors of whether students are willing to engage in discussions or active learning is getting off to a good start with it. If you give them 3 weeks where they are watching videos and answering quiz questions and watching videos and answering quiz questions and watching videos and answering quiz questions, and then suddenly you say, let's talk, please bring your authentic self and share personal experiences, or like be critiquing each other, you haven't really created a culture where they're going to feel comfortable doing that. So if that's something that's important to you to have in the course, you want to do it early, do it often, and do it predictably. And the first few weeks may not go that great while they get to know each other, while they get to know your expectations. But if you kind of stick with it and have those repeated module structures and repeated expectations, students will learn the culture of a course and warm up to it and start to exceed your expectations.
Yeah, that's a great addition, Sarah. So we'll take some time to pause here as well for questions. I've seen a couple come through in the chat, but it looks like Queenie is doing her job very, very well in answering those. But want to give you the opportunity to pose any further questions if you have some about conversation and reflection. Okay, well, we will go ahead and talk about the last topic we're touching on today, which is instructor presence. And so I've mentioned that a couple of times, and Sarah has kind of gotten into it a couple of times as well. And so when you're really doing anything, like getting students to participate, getting them to connect with each other, getting them to engage with materials, a lot of that relies really heavily on your presence in the course. So we don't want students to continue to feel disconnected or feel like they're in some sort of prefabricated course that's chugging along on its own. We want them to be able to feel that you are there, guiding the learning, facilitating the discussion. And students are really going to benefit from your expertise and from your presence in the course. And one of the things that it can do really well is set the tone for the course. And you want to set a tone of care, and you want to be able to offer clarifications throughout the semester. So for example, things like the template that has portions for you to put in instructions and everything like that, those are great. Those aren't going to stop all of the questions that might come in from students. So we want to think about ways you can offer those clarifications or any information that's needed throughout the semester. And Sarah's going to go into some examples for that.
Yeah. So I already mentioned a little bit about how you might welcome students to the course and set that tone earlier, but a big part of that is introducing yourself with a photo or video. And I can't emphasize this enough. My personal story about this is the first time I taught online, I inherited a course. The instructor who was supposed to teach it was given a grant and suddenly left on very short notice. And I didn't have time to do very much to update the course. And I was a grad student without very much money. Webcams were not standard within our laptops at the time. And I didn't have any way to make a video. And so I just ran the course and I felt like I worked my butt off, giving them individualized feedback on their work, being in the discussion boards and teaching, but there was no time when they heard my voice or saw my face. And my SEIs, that term for instructor cares about my learning, tanked about 2 full points. And it just broke my heart because I do care about their learning. And that was something that I always really prided myself on. But we were on quarters at that time. And so when I got that feedback and my heart was broken, I only had about 2 weeks to do anything with that feedback before the next term was starting. And I still didn't have any money and I still didn't have a webcam. So all I was really able to do differently was post a photo of myself and type out a text introduction. And I made a point of putting my photo in a few other points as well, as announcements during the course of with what I was doing that point in the semester. And my SEIs after that term went almost back up to normal with just that one small little change. That's obviously a personal anecdote, but we see this again and again and again with the instructors that we work with. If you only have time to plan one thing differently, I would focus on getting your engagement early in the course so that they see you as the person behind the screen. You can kind of take this idea into a weekly kind of mode and create regular weekly module overviews or announcements, whether that's in text, if you only have a little bit of time or you want your students to be able to engage with this on their phones or other places. But if you can make little videos each week for those modules, it's a really great way to review what was going on last week, what's coming up in the module they're about to get started. You can remind them of housekeeping tasks. Hey, your midterm is next week, so please review this week, or your big paper is coming up. Here's where you should be in your research process. To mention current events. Hey, last week was an election. Everybody's really tired right now, so be kind to yourself. Or to address problems. Hey, that quiz didn't work the way I wanted it to. Please don't worry, I'm going to fix all those points. Give me a little bit of patience, should be fixed by Wednesday. That kind of ongoing stuff that might change semester to semester. And that allows you to just sort of leave the main content a little bit more static, and you don't have to change everything in the course every term. You are still strongly encouraged to hold office hours. Your department may require you to hold office hours, and you can just hold those in Zoom. You can have students sign up for those if you want to using the Carmen calendar function, or you can hold open office hours. That's up to you, but Zoom is a really great way to accomplish that efficiently online. And then ideally, if you're offering Carmen discussions, you would be present in facilitating those. It's a tricky balance. You don't want to get too much in there and have it just be you talking to each individual student. You do want to make space for them to connect with each other, but there should be some kind of presence where they feel like it matters and you're reading their words and seeing their work in those spaces. And then also, obviously, we cannot emphasize this enough because we've said it over and over, but please provide feedback on their assignments. Carmen provides so many great tools using the quiz feedback feature, using rubrics, using SpeedGrader. It is often a lot of work on the front end to create that material, but if you can get them in place, even if you're just adding one new rubric every semester, you'll very quickly get yourself in a place where you can give personalized feedback quickly and responsibly, and it helps students learning so much. Here's an example of one way that an instructor is using announcements as a responsive instructor presence. So this is her announcements tool in Carmen, and she's reminding them of an upcoming big exam. A little bit of personalized tone that she's encouraging them, and then also providing that responsive feedback. She knows there's a problem, that there's a glitch. What is she going to do to handle it to reduce that student's stress about, oh my gosh, this wasn't working. I just took my final exam and something wasn't right. So being able to be responsive, bring their stress down, communicate that you are engaged and you're working on it. Even if you don't know the answer, let them know that you're working on it right now. This is an example of what a module overview looks like. This is not the most flattering picture I've ever taken. When I make these, I just record them in my laptop webcam, get it to a place with like semi-okay lighting. You can make them really quickly using a lot of tools. You can use Zoom. You can pop them into YouTube. You can keep it hosted in Zoom. You can put it in a media site. We have so many instructional videos about how to make DIY videos using whatever device you have available to you. And those are all available in the Teaching and Learning Resource Center and also at our OD Keep Teaching site. There's lots of quick ways. So you don't have to be great at video to make these kind of, this one was 6 minutes, but they can be a minute, 2 minutes, less than 10 minutes. And it lets students see you and feel like you're talking to them and very present with them in the moment each time you run the course.
Okay, so for this question, we want you to think about what you might need to do to amplify or adjust your presence for the online environment. So this might be the amount of feedback provided. You need to think about giving a little bit more feedback in different manners. It might be the type of announcements that you make and how you might go about doing that. So just take a minute or two to think about that question. Okay, and then we have an additional question for you. It's not on the slide, but kind of an informal question that we were hoping to ask. And we wanted to know, in the classes that you're currently conducting, how are you showing students that you care and establishing your tone? We've kind of seen some really good suggestions you all have had for each other. So we'd like to kind of encourage that with this particular question. So just let us know how you're showing students you care and establishing your tone, if you feel comfortable doing so. Check-in videos each week. That is wonderful. That's a great way to do it. So yeah, they can be either tuned to what's going on in the class itself, the topic, the material, or they could just be a general check-in on kind of the state of how things are going in general. Remind them that we're in it together. That's another great way. Yeah, current events. That is a really good way also to avoid that feeling of a prefabricated course. You're also connecting it to what's going on in the world and what's going on in society. And that's going to help students understand the importance of what they're learning and how it's applicable to them. Carmen Announcements is a great tool to use.
I love the idea of a fun Friday.
Oh, that's great too. Yes. Wonderful. Okay, so we are going to talk a little bit about some resources, kind of where you can go based on what you've learned today. So you can request consultations with the Office of Distance Education and E-Learning, and ODE can help you with any teaching strategies that rely on or incorporate technology. You can also, if you're having specific trouble with Carmen, contact Carmen at osu.edu, and they can help kind of troubleshoot any of the issues that you're having. You can also request consultations with the Drake Institute. And so the Drake Institute can help with course design more broadly. They can assist with course material development, and they can also give you documentation of teaching effectiveness. There is teaching.resources.osu.edu. It's a lot of dots. But if you're familiar with the old ODE Resource Center, that has been updated, and it's more of a collaboration between ODE, Drake, the university libraries, some other partners. It has a lot of great articles about some of the best practices that we've been mentioning, in addition to technology tools that you might be using. And then keepteaching.osu.edu. That is going to be the most dynamic and up-to-date website that you can use to check into any changes in university policies or anything that's going on. And then you can see that /get-help. That's a way you can also find out about further workshops or any other email addresses that you might use to contact people who can provide you with assistance. So just a few key takeaways, some of the major points that we addressed today. We're creating engagement with students, between you and students, and then creating engagement with students with each other, providing practice, application, and reflection opportunities, connecting with students throughout the semester, establishing those connections at the outset and continuing them throughout. And then we gave you some ways to ask for assistance or use resources. So at this point, and this is something that we would also love for you to put in the chat if you're able, what is one strategy you feel confident, my words today are not happening, what is one strategy you are confident you can implement effectively? If you want to put that in the chat for us, we would love to hear it. Announcement tool, wonderful. Yeah, once you find out about that, I know when the very first time I used it was Canvas at my old institution. I didn't even know that was a thing. And so I was bombarding students with emails. And then I found out about announcements, and it was much easier for me as well as for students. Changing the structure of modules to meet undergrad needs. So yeah, and that's an important thing to think about as well. How are undergraduates navigating online learning maybe differently from graduate students? Using more videos, and those can be fun too. Once you get the hang of it, they can be really fun and really easy to produce, and they're really useful for your students. Yeah, so thinking about what you do when a lot of your assignments are writing assignments, and that's actually what I used to teach, was writing and rhetoric. So I'm right there with you. And Sarah introduced us to a lot of ways you can use tools, maybe a little bit differently from their intended purpose. So using the quiz tool, but not for a quiz. And so you can think about adapting some of those tactics to maybe alter assignments or take the place of some writing assignments.